However, I instantly saw red. It was one thing for him to be a jerk, or to steal people's food, or even attack disabled people in the name of it being a joke, but for him to assault me. That was the last straw. I refused to take that without fighting back, and before I knew it, I had jumped onto him, and I started punching him like a wild man. He did hit me a few times as well, but I ended up knocking him unconscious. Some of my fellow employees pulled me off of him and called for an ambulance. When the medics arrived, he was holding his head and complaining about how swollen his eye was. Police showed up as well because of the way that Trevor had been hurt and started asking around to see who had attacked him, and when they asked me, Megan and Felicia spoke up and told the officer that Trevor had gone crazy and had attacked me for no reason. The police officer was skeptical, but everyone else in the office all agreed and swore that Megan and Felicia were telling the truth. Hi, my name is Derek, and I had the boss from hell. I know lots of people say that, but mine was an absolute monster. He was such a terrible boss, and a person that I almost ended up going to prison just for finally standing up to him. Let me start off at the beginning, though. I'm not sure if you'll agree that I handled things in a healthy manner, but more than likely, you will at least understand my motivations. So after I graduated from college, I got an entry-level position for a large firm in my city. Everyone wanted to work for them because they were so incredibly profitable, so I felt really lucky to be hired by them. After a few years, I even began to move up in the company, since I have a rather good work ethic. So much so that I joined a marketing team and was chosen to be the lead. My job was to make sure that my team was working diligently and for us to meet our deadlines. Things were going really well, actually. That is, until my boss was promoted. For as long as I was in my position, we got along great and I loved working for him. But after he was promoted, the man that the company chose to replace him was the problem. His name was Trevor, and he created unrealistic expectations for us. And when we wouldn't meet them, he would scream and yell at us and call us names. I can't believe we haven't fired all of you idiots yet. Why are you so incompetent?
We're sorry, sir, but we can't complete work on time with the time frames that you made for us. We either need more time or we need you to hire more people to help us make it happen.
No, what you need is to be fired and be replaced with someone that actually wants to work. You lazy, filthy pig. You're fired. That sort of thing happened often, and as the lead of the team. It was my job to try to motivate people to work hard, but aside from not wanting to be fired, my team wasn't motivated. The few times that we were able to make our deadlines, Trevor laughed, and then made the following week's deadline harder to hit. It felt like the more work that we did, the more he would expect and force onto our plate, despite the fact that my team and I were becoming burnt out from the workload. Of course, Trevor didn't care, and the few times that I brought it to his attention, I nearly was fired. Hey, Trevor, do you have a minute to talk about our latest project? Ugh, for crying out loud. What do you want? Well, sir, it's just that my team is barely able to keep up with the workflow. I have several people pleading with me for vacation time as they feel burnt out. Is there any way that I can grant some of these requests? Am I the only person around here that does any work? You people should look up to me as an example. I work long days and that's why I'm as successful as I am. There was just no way of getting through to him. It was true that he spent more time at work than anyone else, but I had it on good authority that he spent most of the time in his office, surfing the internet or watching videos online. Many people had walked in on him watching inappropriate things, but since he was our boss, we all just kept quiet. Now, if it was only because he was a slave driver, then that wouldn't have made him the worst boss that I had ever had. After all, I have had my fair share of terrible bosses that made unreasonable demands. Oh no. It was much more than that. Everyone put their lunches into a refrigerator in the break room, and food from people's lunches would routinely go missing. Everyone at some point made a complaint to Trevor and demanded that he do something to stop the lunch bandit, but he refused. Even when people demanded we put a video camera in the break room to stop whoever it was that was stealing food, he vehemently refused to do so. After he said that, I suspected that he was the thief, but just like everyone else, I couldn't prove it. But again, if that was all there was to it, then I could just chalk it up to Trevor being a jerk. But what made him a monster was the way he treated Megan and Felicia. Both women had disabilities, and Trevor loved to play practical jokes on them. Although just like with the food, no one ever caught him in the act, and therefore no one could prove that he was the joker that harassed them. Megan used a wheelchair, and her desk was one of those adjustable ones that could raise and lower, which was perfect for her, since she could lower it down so that she could more easily access it. Well, Trevor, or at least everyone assumed it was him, had pressed and jammed the button for it to go up so that it was stuck at its highest setting. I had to get a stepladder in order to see the touchpad that controlled the motors that raised and lowered the desk, and it took me a good hour to fix it so that Megan could actually use her desk to do work. Later in the day, when Megan was asking around to try to find out who had messed with her desk, she overheard Trevor giggling like a schoolboy. But when she confronted him, he just dismissed her accusations.
Well, if you didn't do it, then why are you giggling?
It's none of your business, but I'm giggling because of a joke I heard last night. I wouldn't expect you to understand the joke, though. After all, the joke was about running. I was nearby when he said this, and I nearly spit out my coffee when he made that remark. Megan was speechless, and after a few seconds, Trevor just marched off with a smug look on his face. It was a pretty mean thing to say to Megan, and what he did was just juvenile, but that pales in comparison to what he did to Felicia. Felicia uses crutches to walk around, and one day she was so distracted by work that she didn't notice when someone took them off of her desk. They were later found on the roof of all places, and just as before, Trevor was seen snickering when Felicia complained about someone taking the very thing that she needed to be able to walk. Trevor was just a truly awful person, and one day when I found that the pastrami sandwich that I had made for myself went missing, I had had enough. I decided to go home that night, and I made a chocolate cake, and I put a bunch of laxatives into it and took a large piece of it into work and left it in a see-through container in the fridge. Sure enough, by lunchtime, the piece of cake was gone, and after lunch, Trevor was nowhere to be seen. A few people mentioned that they had seen him earlier, running towards the bathroom with a very panicked look on his face. I knew right away that he had fallen for my trap, but later when he emerged from the bathroom, all of us were disgusted. He hadn't made it in time and his pants were very messy. However, he didn't care at all and just stormed towards me. It was obvious that he was furious with me. After all, it had been my lunch that had made him sick. What kind of sick person would make a cake that would purposefully make someone sick? What do you mean? I made myself some cake and someone stole it. Do you know who stole it? I obviously do. You psycho, you made me sick. You'll pay for that. He then slapped me twice so quickly that I didn't have time to react. However, I instantly saw red. It was one thing for him to be a jerk, or to steal people's food, or even attack disabled people in the name of it being a joke, but for him to assault me. That was the last straw. I refused to take that without fighting back, and before I knew it, I had jumped onto him, and I started punching him like a wild man. He did hit me a few times as well, but I ended up knocking him unconscious. Some of my fellow employees pulled me off of him and called for an ambulance. When the medics arrived, he was holding his head and complaining about how swollen his eye was. Police showed up as well because of the way that Trevor had been hurt and started asking around to see who had attacked him, and when they asked me, Megan and Felicia spoke up and told the officer that Trevor had gone crazy and had attacked me for no reason. The police officer was skeptical, but everyone else in the office all agreed and swore that Megan and Felicia were telling the truth. I was shocked that everyone would stand up for me like that, but then I realized that it was an easy choice since it screwed over Trevor, and everyone was sick and tired of his antics. Trevor ended up needing surgery since I had ruptured some nerve endings in his right eye, and as a result, he ended up going blind in that eye. He even tried to get me fired, but the company heard the testimonies of my fellow employees, and the company was furious with Trevor for attacking me unprovoked. Once the company found out that he had been the instigator, they let me off with a warning and ended up firing Trevor. With my fellow employees backing me up, I pressed charges against Trevor and got him arrested. I did feel a little bad about that, since he ended up being sentenced to 3 years for assault. I could have just as easily ended up with a prison sentence as well, but Felicia and Megan stood up for me and protected me. As a result, I was able to stay with the company for many more years. In fact, after Trevor was gone, management offered me his old job, and I accepted it. Later, I had an idea and wrote a book, which became a bestseller. The title was My Crazy Boss. I sent a copy of the book to Trevor and wrote him a letter in prison, telling him about the book. I also informed him about my new position. I received a letter back full of expletives and curse words. It was clear that I had touched a nerve, although I didn't really care. So tell me, did I go too far?